Picture this. In 2004, Pontiac decided to resurrect one of the most legendary names in American muscle car history, the GTO, the GOAT. The car that literally invented the muscle car segment back in 1964. They brought back the nameplate with a 350 horsepower LS1 V8 straight from the Corvette. They gave it independent rear suspension and a 6-speed manual transmission. They priced it at $32,000, less than a loaded pickup truck. And then, they made one absolutely baffling decision that would define this car's entire 3-year existence. They forgot the hood scoops. This is the 2004 Pontiac GTO, and if you're looking at it thinking, that's just a forgettable coupe, you're not alone. That was exactly the problem. Pontiac brought back the most aggressive name in muscle car history and wrapped it in a body so anonymous that car and driver literally said it looked like something the phone company would use for fleet cars. Motor Trend called the styling tastefully subdued, which is automotive journalism speak for, we're trying to be nice but this thing is painfully appliance-like. And here's the tragedy. Pontiac didn't build a bad car, they built a genuinely fast car. They just wrapped it in the wrong shell. Here's where it gets painful. Look at that hood. Flat, smooth, completely devoid of the functional hood scoops that defined every classic GTO from the 1960s. The original 1964 GTO had hood scoops. The legendary 1966 GTO had hood scoops. The 1969 Judge had massive hood scoops that looked like they could inhale small children. But the 2004 reboot? Nothing. Just flat, painted metal. Like Pontiac's designers forgot they were building a muscle car and accidentally designed a rental car instead. But here's the twist. Underneath that corporate exterior lived real performance hardware. The LS1, 5.7 liters of aluminum V8 Fury making 350 horsepower at 5,200 RPM and 365 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 RPM. This wasn't some detuned economy engine pretending to be sporty. This was mechanically identical to the engine Chevrolet installed in the C5 Corvette, with minor accessory and calibration differences. The same engine that made the Corvette a legitimate sports car was now hiding under a hood so bland it could disappear in a Best Buy parking lot. And the performance? 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds. Multiple period tests confirmed it. Motor Trend, Car and Driver, Motor Week, all recorded identical times. 5.3 seconds. That put the 2004 GTO in genuinely fast territory for its era. The quarter mile? 13.6 seconds at 104 miles per hour, according to Motor Trend's instrumented testing. These weren't for a family car numbers. These were legitimate muscle car performance figures that could embarrass a lot of so-called sports cars. Let's put that in perspective. The 2004 Ford Mustang GT, the GTO's most direct competitor, made only 260 horsepower from its 4.6-liter SOHC V8. The Mustang ran 0 to 60 in somewhere between 5.3 and 6.1 seconds, depending on which test you read and whose grandmother was driving. The GTO matched or beat the Mustang while offering substantially more torque and a far more sophisticated chassis with independent rear suspension instead of the Mustang's ancient live-axle setup. Now, if you wanted to beat the GTO with a Mustang, you needed to step up to the SVT Cobra, 390 horsepower from a supercharged 4.6-liter DOHC V8, 0 to 60 in 4.5 to 4.9 seconds, quarter-mile times in the low 13s. But here's the catch. The SVT Cobra started at $34,860. That's roughly $2,000 more than the GTO with the manual transmission, assuming you could find a Cobra without dealer markup, which you couldn't. The Terminator Cobra was so hot in 2004 that dealers were adding $5,000 to $10,000 on top of MSRP. So the GTO was faster than the base Mustang GT and substantially cheaper than what you'd actually pay for a Cobra. On paper, Pontiac had nailed the value proposition. So why didn't it work? To understand the 2004 GTO's failure, you need to understand what the name meant. In 1964, Pontiac created the modern muscle car template. Take a mid-size platform, the Tempest Lehmans. Drop in a massive engine it was never supposed to have, the 389 cubic inch V8 from Pontiac's full-size cars. Add some sporty badges and aggressive styling. Price it where young people could actually afford it. Boom. instant legend. The original 1964 GTO made 325 horsepower as standard, or 348 with the optional tri-power carburetor setup. 0 to 60 in 7.7 seconds for the standard car, 6.6 seconds for the tri-power version. That might sound slow today, but in 1964, those were scorching numbers. And the car looked aggressive. Hood scoops, dual exhausts, wide tires, chrome everywhere. You saw this car coming from 3 blocks away. By 1966, the GTO had become its own model separate from the Tempest line. New Coke bottle styling, stacked headlights, more hood scoops, engine options ranging from 335 to 370 horsepower. And that year, Pontiac sold 96,946 GTOs, the highest production number for any muscle car in a single year. The car had become a cultural phenomenon. If you wanted to be cool in 1966 America, you wanted a GTO. The GTO survived through 1974, getting progressively less powerful as emissions regulations strangled V8 performance. The final 1974 GTO made just 200 horsepower from a 350 cubic inch V8 and ran 0 to 60 in over 9 seconds. The muscle car era was officially dead, killed by the Clean Air Act, insurance costs, and the OPEC oil embargo. For 30 years, the GTO name sat dormant while enthusiasts wondered if it would ever return. Fast forward to the early 2000s. Bob Lutz, GM's product development chief and genuine car enthusiast, was in Australia and drove a car that made him stop and think. The Holden Monaro, a 2-door coupe variant of Holden's Commodore sedan with a V8 engine and rear-wheel drive. Lutz saw potential. GM already owned Holden. The car existed. The platform was proven. Converting it to left-hand drive and importing it to America would be vastly cheaper than developing an all-new muscle car from scratch. Sometimes the cheapest solution is the wrong solution. Pontiac imported the Holden Monaro essentially unchanged. Same body, same basic interior. They swapped in the LS1 from the Corvette, converted the steering to left-hand drive, added some Pontiac badges and called it a GTO. Development costs? Minimal. Time to market? Fast. But here's what they didn't do. Redesign the exterior to look like a proper American muscle car. The Monaro's conservative Australian styling remained intact, and American muscle car buyers, accustomed to aggressive looks, took one look at the 2004 GTO and said, "That's not a muscle car. That's a Pontiac Grand Prix that went to the gym." To be clear, the Monaro itself wasn't the problem. In Australia, it was loved. The problem was calling it a GTO without giving it GTO swagger. Even the exhaust system revealed the car's rushed development. Both exhaust pipes exited on the driver's side. Not symmetrical dual exhausts like every classic muscle car. Both pipes. Same side. Why? Because that's how the Holden Monaro was engineered for right-hand drive markets, and Pontiac didn't want to spend the money redesigning the exhaust routing. They did tune the exhaust note to mimic the sound of the original 1964 GTO. Credit where credit is due. But visually, it looked wrong. The interior told the same story. It was fine. Comfortable seats, decent materials, logical layout. But it looked like it came from a Holden sedan, because it did. There was nothing special about it. Nothing that screamed, "This is a legendary American muscle car." Just a nice Australian coupe interior with a Pontiac steering wheel. And let's not forget the trunk. To meet US crash standards, Pontiac had to move the fuel tank inside the trunk, behind the rear seat. The result? A trunk so small you could barely fit a pizza box. Reviewers noticed. Owners definitely noticed. You couldn't take this car on a road trip without packing like you were flying Spirit Airlines. Here's where it gets complicated. Because once you got behind the wheel, the 2004 GTO started making a lot more sense. That LS1 delivered smooth, effortless power across the entire rev range. The Tremec T56 6-speed manual had precise mechanical shifts that felt satisfying. The independent rear suspension meant the car actually handled corners instead of just pointing hopefully in the right direction, like older muscle cars. This was a genuinely capable sports coupe that could compete with European offerings. But nobody cared, because it didn't look fast. Take the 2004 GTO to any muscle car show and park it next to classic GTOs from the 60s. The contrast is painful. The originals radiate aggression even sitting still. Hood scoops, wide stances, chrome bumpers, bold graphics. The 2004 car looks like it wandered in by mistake, like someone's daily driver that accidentally ended up in the show field. So invisible that enthusiasts would walk past the new GTO to admire the classics. That's the problem Pontiac created. The sales numbers told the story. Pontiac projected they'd sell 18,000 GTOs in the first year. Realistic for a niche performance car. They sold 13,569 units. That's 75.4% of target. Not a complete disaster, but definitely disappointing. The car was fast. It was relatively affordable. It had real performance hardware, but it looked invisible. And in the muscle car market, where image matters as much as acceleration, invisible is death. The automotive press praised the driving dynamics while criticizing the styling with almost comedic consistency. Car and driver. It has the soul of a muscle car, but the body of an accountant. Motor trend. Performance is there, but passion is missing. Auto Week. Drives like a sports car, looks like a rental car. Every review followed the same pattern. Love the engine, hate the wrapper. Pontiac had built a car that was great to drive, but embarrassing to be seen in. That's not a winning formula. The missing hood scoops became symbolic of everything wrong with the 2004 GTO. Those scoops weren't just decorative. They were functional on the high-performance Ram Air classic cars, feeding cold air directly to the carburetor. But more importantly, they were visual. They announced, "This car has a big engine and it needs to breathe." The flat hood on the 2004 car said, "I'm trying not to attract attention." That's the opposite of what a GTO should communicate. Pontiac heard the complaints. For 2005, they added hood scoops, not functional ones, just decorative scoops to give the car more presence. They also upgraded to the LS2 engine, making 400 horsepower, bigger brakes, revised suspension, and crucially, they fixed the exhaust routing so pipes exited both sides like a proper muscle car. The 2005 and 2006 GTOs were genuinely improved cars. But by then, it was too late. The damage was done. Sales for 2005, 11,069 units, down 18% from the already disappointing first year. 2006, the final year, 13,948 units. Slightly better, but still below target. The improvements came too late to save the program. General Motors pulled the plug. After just 3 model years and roughly 39,000 total units sold, the GTO experiment ended. The GOAT was dead, again. When the last 2006 GTO rolled off the assembly line in Australia, it marked the end of Pontiac's attempt to revive its most famous nameplate. No announcement, no fanfare, just discontinued. The tooling went back to Holden for the Monaro, which continued in Australia. American buyers who wanted a V8 coupe would need to look elsewhere. The Mustang, the Charger, the upcoming Camaro, anything but a GTO, because there were no more GTOs. 4 years later, Pontiac itself died. General Motors, reeling from the financial crisis and government bankruptcy, killed multiple brands. Pontiac was one of them. 84 years of automotive history erased. The brand that built the original muscle car. The brand that gave us the Firebird Trans Am, the Fiero, the Solstice, gone. And with it, any chance of ever seeing another GTO. The nameplate now belongs to automotive history. Today, the 2004 through 2006 GTOs occupy an interesting space in the used car market. They're not particularly valuable as collectibles. You can find decent examples for $15,000 to $25,000. That's less than they cost new when adjusted for inflation. They're not rare enough to be special, not old enough to be classic, not styled distinctively enough to be iconic. They're just good performance cars that time forgot. But here's the thing, the owners who have them often love them. The LS1 is bulletproof reliable. Parts are cheap because it shares components with Corvettes and Camaros. The performance is still genuinely quick by modern standards. The styling that doomed the car originally now makes it a sleeper. Nobody expects the invisible red coupe to run 5.3 seconds to 60. Current owners call them the best muscle car nobody wanted. And they might be right. The The 2004 GTO represents one of the great what-if stories in automotive history. What if Pontiac had spent the money to restyle the exterior? What if they'd added hood scoops from day one? What if they'd made the car look as aggressive as it drove? We'll never know, because Pontiac chose the cheap route. Import an Australian coupe, badge it as a GTO, hope buyers would accept it. The market said no, and Pontiac learned an expensive lesson about the importance of image in the muscle car segment. Look, the LS1 deserved better. 350 horsepower of proven, reliable Corvette-grade V8 technology hidden under a hood that wouldn't intimidate a Honda Accord. This engine had already earned its reputation in the C5 Corvette as one of GM's best power plants. It made the right sounds. It delivered the right performance. It was exactly the engine a modern GTO should have. And almost nobody bought the car it powered because they couldn't get past the exterior styling. The 2004 GTO arrived at an interesting moment in automotive history. The muscle car renaissance was just beginning but hadn't fully formed yet. The retro-styled Mustang was about to explode in popularity. The Dodge Challenger and new Camaro weren't even on the horizon yet. Pontiac had a chance to lead this new wave of American performance. Instead, they built a car that looked like it was embarrassed to be fast. And the market, correctly, didn't reward that approach. If you see a 2004 GTO today, appreciate it for what it actually is, rather than what it isn't. Under that conservative sheet metal lives genuine performance hardware. The LS1 doesn't care that the hood is flat. The Trim-X 6-speed doesn't care that there aren't scoops. The independent rear suspension doesn't care that the styling looks subdued. These cars can still run 5.3 seconds to 60 and embarrass plenty of modern hot hatches. They're usable, comfortable, reliable daily drivers that happen to have Corvette power. That's actually pretty cool, even if it doesn't look cool. The lesson? You can't revive a legend halfway. The GTO name carried expectations. 40 years of muscle car heritage demanded respect. Pontiac tried to split the difference. Modern performance with conservative styling. They thought buyers would appreciate the sleeper approach. They were wrong. Muscle car buyers wanted the full experience. The sound, the speed, and the swagger. Pontiac delivered 2 out of 3 and wondered why sales tanked. Sometimes, cheap isn't wise. Sometimes, bringing a car from Australia isn't the answer. And always, if you resurrect the GTO name, you damn well better include the hood scoops. If this story of Pontiac forgetting the hood scoops wasn't painful enough, we've got more automotive tragedies and occasional triumphs waiting for you. Next time, we're diving into another case of Detroit almost getting it right. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And drop a comment. Would you trade hood scoops for LS1 performance? Or is muscle car swagger non-negotiable? Let's argue about it. This is Car Chronicles, where even fast cars can fail if they forget to look fast.